Well, good afternoon. I'm John Levy, and it's my privilege to serve as the 10th chair of the board of the Legal Services Corporation. On behalf of our LSC board, I welcome you to our 6th annual Veterans Day Forum. This year's event focuses on the pressing problems facing veterans who are unhoused or at risk for homelessness. We will be privileged to hear remarks from Florida Representative Laurel Lee and Nichelle Carver, Senior Regional Advisor with the U.S. Interagency Council, LSC Veterans Task Force Co-Chair, and our LSC board member, the wonderful Abigail Lawless Kuzma, and LSC's Chief Human Resource Officer, Danielle Brooks, herself an Army veteran, will also deliver remarks. And LSC's Vice President for Legal Affairs and General Counsel, Will Gunn, a former General Counsel of the Department for Veterans Affairs, will moderate a panel looking at strategies for better delivering legal services to veterans experiencing or at risk for experiencing homelessness. LSC's president, Ron Flagg, will offer brief closing remarks. Well, Veterans Day this year unfolds against a global backdrop of turmoil and unrest that throws into sharp relief the tremendous significance of the vital service rendered by our nation's veterans. Their service and their sacrifice that we do not, their guarantee that we do not experience the collapse in the rule of law engulfing several areas of the world today. And they ensure that the peace, freedom, and justice we have been so fortunate to enjoy here in our country possible and continue. President Woodrow Wilson recognized this in his message to the nation for the first Armistice Day in 1919, now known as Veterans Day. President Wilson called for a day to, and I quote, be filled with solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in the country's service, and with gratitude for the victory. And part of that victory, President Wilson noted, was the opportunity has given America to show her sympathy with peace and justice in the Council of Nations. Well, over 100 years later, America's servicemen and women continue to fight and work for peace and justice. They should not have to fight for a secure and dignified life and access to the justice system when they return home. Today's program highlights one problem facing our veterans: housing insecurity. As Texas Chief Justice Nathan Hecht has observed, the challenges are many. And I quote him, too often, servicemen and women return from duty to find benefits delayed, families struggling, jobs scarce, homes in foreclosure, and debt collectors at the door. These enemies at home can be as real a threat to a veteran's survival as the enemies faced in the field. Our military cannot return from risking their lives in defense of our freedoms and values only to find that the justice system they fought for has left them behind. Their access to justice is assured, unquote. Helping veterans access their benefits and their rights is fundamental to the mission of LSC and its grantees across our country. For 50 years, they have supported veterans in a number of ways, including launching stateside legal the first national website focused on helping veterans and military families, and establishing medical legal partnerships with Veterans Health Centers. Many grantees operate legal hotlines for veterans and sponsor and participate in stand-down events and Military Mondays, and receive regular referrals from veterans groups. In addition, LSC grantees provide regular assistance to veterans in a wide variety of legal challenges, including eviction, foreclosure, unemployment, and wrongful denial of benefits. In 2021, LSC released a wide-ranging report of its wonderful, hard-working National Veterans Task Force that raised awareness of the civil legal needs of veterans, promoted partnerships among legal aid providers and other organizations that serve veterans, highlighted successful model programs, and provided strategies to increase pro bono legal services for vets. Tomorrow, LSC releases an episode of LSC's Talk Justice podcast that explores the heartbreaking problem of suicide among veterans. So despite all these efforts, much work remains to be done. LSC's 2022 Justice Gap report quantified the legal challenges facing veterans, finding that 76% of low-income veteran households experienced at least one civil legal problem in the past year, and 44% of them experienced 5 or more problems. A whopping 27% experienced 10 or more such problems. Well, last year, LSC funded organizations provided legal help to more than 32,000 veteran households. And still, low-income veterans reported they had not received any or enough legal help for 84% of their civil legal issues. This is simply a national disgrace. We have a sacred duty to honor the service and sacrifice of our veterans, but we're not even providing the most basic access to the very rights they fought to preserve. We must do more. At events like this, I can't help but recall Lincoln's famous words at Gettysburg. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is impossible to capture the valor and service of our veterans in oratory, but we can get closer if our words are not just expressions of gratitude, but also prescriptions for action. Our veterans answered the call, and so must we. We must ensure they receive the benefits they have earned and have full access to the justice system they have protected and defended. In so doing, we will follow the admonition of another president, John F. Kennedy, who on a Veterans Day decades ago, and I quote it, "As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them." Well, thank you very much. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce LSC's Chief Human Resources Officer and a United States Army veteran, Danielle Brooks. Danielle started her HR career in the Army as a human resources officer and served in positions of increasing responsibility, ending as a major. She has also held leadership positions at the Defense Department and other defense-related organizations. She received a BA in Communications from St. Augustine University and a master's degree in education from American Intercontinental University. Danielle, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you, John. I'll give you a mighty huh on behalf of the Army. I still got it in me. We thank you so much for those remarks to kick us off today. I am a third-generation Army veteran. My grandfather served in World War II, and I had an uncle who served in Vietnam. And so I'm always honored and delighted to participate in anything involving care of veterans. I feel fortunate and blessed to be one of the lucky ones who gained so much and had my life transformed by the opportunity to serve my country as a non-commissioned officer, a ROTC scholarship recipient, and many years as a commissioned officer. So again, thank you so much. But to frame our next time that we have together, I want to give you some background about what you are going to be a part of today. According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, there are an estimated 40,056 homeless veterans on any given night. Additionally, while 7% of the general population can claim veteran status, nearly 13% of the homeless adult population are veterans. As stated in the 2022 U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Challenge Survey, 6 out of the 10 unmet needs of veterans revolve around legal assistance. For example, the top 3 unmet needs were legal assistance to expunge a criminal record, legal assistance for credit issues, including debt collection, and legal assistance to resolve outstanding court fees and fines. Today's event is focused on addressing those issues, plus other legal issues faced by veterans experiencing or at risk of becoming homeless. As Chairman Levy shared, we'll begin by hearing remarks from a member of Congress who is dedicated to eliminating veteran homelessness. So let me hand the virtual microphone over to John Malcolm, a member of LSC's Board of Directors and co-chair of LSC's Veteran Task Force, to introduce our first special guest. John, take it away.
Well, thank you, Danielle, and thank you for your service. My apologies a little bit for my voice. As you can hear, I have a touch of laryngitis. It is my pleasure and my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Congresswoman Laurel. Oh, this is bad. Congresswoman Laurel Lee, who represents the 15th District of Florida, which encompasses eastern Hillsborough County, as well as parts of Pasco and Polk counties. She is the daughter of a 2-star general in the Air Force. So she grew up in a military family and was in fact born on White-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Prior to her election to the House of Representatives, she served as Florida's Secretary of State, which is actually how I first became acquainted with Congresswoman Lee. She also previously served as a circuit court judge in Florida's 13th Judicial Court and as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Florida. She currently serves on the House Judiciary Committee and Homeland Security Committees, and in September, she was appointed to serve as a conferee to the fiscal year 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, which sets the military's fiscal year funding and addresses national security and military priorities. Congresswoman Lee, my apologies again for my voice. We are honored to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, John. I wish I was there and could give you a cup of hot tea. I appreciate so much your introduction of me, and I hope that you get to feeling better and get your voice back soon. So it is such a pleasure and an honor for me to get to be here today with all of you. As John mentioned, I had the great fortune of growing up in a military family. So my whole life, I was surrounded by and raised up by people who served this country. And it really instilled so many values that are and experiences that are so important to me even today. You know, some are principles like loving your country, respecting our flag, but also very importantly, respecting the men and women who serve our country and understanding some of the unique situations and needs that they have, that service carries with it for them and for their families. So the military has been a huge part of my upbringing and also of my experiences as a professional as I have gone through that world as well. So an interesting thing about my district. So I represent an area of Tampa that it doesn't include MacDill Air Force Base, but it's very close to MacDill, and it includes a lot of suburban neighborhoods. So many of the men and women who currently or previously were stationed out of MacDill live in my district. We have close to 50,000 active duty service members and veterans in my congressional district. So I already brought to this process a great emphasis and priority and focus on making sure that we are serving our active duty service members and veterans, but they're also a very important part of the area that I now represent in Congress. So since being here, it has been a privilege for me to get involved with and join our other regional members in supporting legislation and measures that make sure that we are providing the type of services, healthcare, and benefits that are appropriate, and that we're keeping up with new and emerging issues so that when it comes to accessing treatment, making sure that that is convenient, making sure that's being provided in a way that members can actually and veterans can actually reach it and get to it. You know, those are the kinds of things that we want to remain ever vigilant about. But there's also something going back to my background before serving in Congress that I want to circle back to, because it really gives me a perspective on how vital the work that you are doing at LSC with veterans and veterans civil legal issues, why that is so important, and really some of the successes that you all have already achieved. So I spent about 6 years serving as a circuit court judge in the Tampa area. And as a consequence, really got to see in real life how people were impacted when they came to court, what those experiences are like, some of the barriers that they encountered. I spent several years as a family court judge in particular, and so many of our litigants were self-represented. And I quickly saw how things that we had set up as procedures in court could operate as barriers because they were difficult to understand. You know, if the form was hard to access or hard to find on the website, or if the language is unclear, if we used vernacular that would make sense in the clerk's office, but not to somebody who didn't spend their every day in the courthouse, that simple things like that could prove barriers to litigants getting through the process and getting what they needed out of the legal process. I also spent earlier in my career, I volunteered as an attorney for the Bay Area Legal Services Domestic Violence Assistance Project, where we helped survivors of domestic violence get injunctions. And so I would hear from them too, the things that are intimidating or the things that are barriers to getting into the courtroom. Now, LSC and Bay Area Legal Services, I know you're going to hear directly from Bay Area here in a moment. I'm so glad there's a representative to talk about Veterans Treatment Court. But I can tell you what an incredible success that was in our community. And it really was designed to eliminate exactly those types of barriers, to find people who have issues that are relatively easily resolved if you have the right support. If you have a hotline you can call and get a correct, true, accurate answer to your question, or if you have a person, an advocate, an attorney who can help you with things like, you know, getting records expunged, getting, you know, all of the things, getting through the hearing process, understanding what to do. So I think it is really a wonderful thing and such important work that you all have committed yourselves to. I've seen it in action. I've seen how important and successful it can be. So it is an honor for me to get to be here with you to give credit where it is due to how hard you all have worked to set up these programs, programs, to identify the needs, and to find innovative ways to meet them. I know I am very proud to be part of a bipartisan group of members of Congress who have come out and express how important it is that we continue to support LSC and that we continue to support the people in our communities who are in need of your services. So I thank you so much for having me and look forward to our continued partnership.
Thank you so much, Representative Lee, for your kind remarks and your commitment to ensuring military families and veterans have the highest level of care possible. You know, thinking about my service, I am what we used to call a double bubble. I've been to airborne and air assault school. I jumped out of perfectly good planes, as they say, and rappelled from helicopters. So I'm grateful, but I thank you for everyone that's looking out for our veteran healthcare, and hopefully my knees will hold out and I won't have to partake in it. But I certainly, again, thank you for your commitment into making sure if I do, that it will be there for me. Your remarks are a perfect segue into our next speaker, Abby Kuzmin. Abby is another member of LSC's board of directors and served as co-chair of the Veterans Task Force. She will give a brief update on the work that LSC and partners have been doing to implement the recommendations contained in the Veterans Task Force report. Over to you, Abby.
Thank you, Danielle. So as we just said, good afternoon and welcome. I'm Abby Kuzma. I'm co-chair of the Veterans Task Force and member of LSC's board of directors. And it's my pleasure to speak today about the work of LSC's Veterans Task Force and our progress in implementing the task force's recommendations. As many of you know, I have firsthand knowledge of the importance of service to our veterans, not only from my work on the task force, but also because we served military service veterans in the legal services program that I founded and ran. And so I really have seen this firsthand. As in addition, this work is very near and dear to my heart because my father was a World War II Japanese prisoner of war and had a horrific experience. And then, of course, so I was raised with those stories. And then my son, Peter, was also served in Iraq. So very near and dear to my heart. LSC's Veterans Task Force carried out its work between 2020 and 2021. The 43 members met regularly over the course of the year to identify veterans' most critical civil legal needs, examine existing resources available to veterans, and develop recommendations for increasing veterans' access to legal assistance. The task force consulted experts from the Department of Veterans Affairs, the judiciary, healthcare systems, and organizations working with minority veteran populations. Through these efforts, the task force produced 13 substantive recommendations for legal aid providers, LSC, state and local governments, and Congress to increase veterans' access to comprehensive services, including civil legal aid. The overarching theme of many of these recommendations was the importance of collaboration among organizations, including legal aid organizations, to serve veterans. As John Levy likes to say, LSC doesn't write task force reports to sit on shelves gathering dust. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the work of LSC and its partners that we have been doing to bring the task force's recommendations to life. We were grateful that when asked if they wanted to remain involved in LSC's work to implement the report recommendations, multiple task force members and colleagues answered with a resounding yes. And we have spent the year since last Veterans Day collaborating on several initiatives to raise awareness on civil legal issues faced by veterans and bring community partners, law firms, the VA, and of course, LSC's grantees together to address those issues in a holistic fashion. I want to highlight 3 of these initiatives. First, LSC coordinated with the VA to offer a live virtual training to its grantees on veteran cultural competency. The training, conducted by Dr. Emily Edwards, director of the Dialectical Behavioral Therapy for Justice-Involved Veterans Program at the VA, explored the themes of reentry into civilian society after separation from the military, building rapport and understanding the needs as social determinants of health. The purpose of the training was to help grantee staff to recognize the cultural differences that make the military and veteran communities unique as potential clients in order to effectively assist veteran clients. The training was part of LSC's ongoing work to educate legal aid providers about issues facing veterans. Next, LSC is releasing an episode of our podcast, and John mentioned this earlier, Talk Justice, tomorrow, discussing the role that legal aid plays in a holistic approach to preventing veteran suicide. Guests will discuss the social factors that contribute to a veteran's risk of suicide and the ways in which civil legal aid providers can address the factors that have legal solutions, such as consumer debt and family law issues. The episode features LSC's General Counsel Will Gunn, moderating a discussion with Jeff Staton, managing attorney at the Legal Aid Society in Louisville, Kentucky, and Dr. Eric Elbogen, director of the National Veterans Financial Resource Center at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Finally, the task force implementation team conducted a second pilot clinic, which legal aid providers, pro bono attorneys, and veteran service officers assisted veterans with legal issues, VA benefit issues, and discharge upgrades. The clinic was held on Thursday, November 9th at the Vector Center in Warner Robins, Georgia, and served 15 veterans representing approximately 50 legal problems. The clinic built on the model piloted last year in Florida and was a joint effort with Mission United of Central Georgia, Georgia Legal Services Program, Paralyzed Veterans of America, DLA Piper, and Holland and Knight. Two things make this clinic model unique: the integration of veteran service officers and the requirement that the clinic host commit to providing warm handoffs, not just referrals. And we know that that's been an issue in a lot of programs, to participating veterans who need more assistance than can be provided at a clinic. LSC and its partners intend to use lessons learned from these two clinics to develop a toolkit for other legal aid providers to use in similar clinics. We truly do not let our reports gather dust, and the Veterans Task Force implementation team's efforts over the past year are evidence of LSC's commitment to ensuring that the work of our task forces result in real, tangible improvements in the ability of LSC's client populations to access legal services. Thank you. And it's been, let me say again, it's been a privilege to be a part of this really important task force. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that insightful update. Abby, I just was, riveted, and you mentioning John Levy's saying made me think about myself being a part of the Be All You Can Be Army slogan at the time I joined. And certainly LSC is carrying out those efforts to be all it can be, to be about it and not just produce reports for consumption, but putting legs on it, as it were. So again, thank you for that update. Very, very insightful. It is now my honor to introduce our next guest, Nichelle Carver. Nichelle is a Senior Regional Director with the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, the only federal agency charged with the responsibility to examine the root causes of homelessness and develop strategies to end homelessness in America. Nichelle has 25 years of experience leading teams in the mental health and homeless service fields. Her career began with a shelter program, assisting families experiencing homelessness with locating permanent housing and supportive services. She then spent more than 15 years with the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development. During her tenure, Virginia decreased overall homelessness by 34% and was the first state to functionally end veterans' homelessness. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today, Nichelle. Oh, I am so sorry. I'm just getting breaking news that Nichelle was not able to join us at this time. So we are going to segue into our panel. Thankful for technology. We're moving right along. So I am honored to turn the floor over to my colleague that you've already heard so much about, LSC's General Counsel, Will Gunn, to moderate today's panel. Will is a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, having served as a military lawyer in the Air Force Judge Advocate General's Corps. He subsequently served as the General Counsel at the Department of Veterans Affairs and in the private and nonprofit sectors prior to joining LSC in 2021. Will inspires us all daily with his kindness, professionalism, and dedication to mission. Over to you, Will, for this very important discussion.
Thank you very much, Danielle. And I am reminded, as you said, I am an Air Force veteran. And in the Air Force, we say that flexibility is the key to air power. So this is not a problem at all. Welcome, everyone. I am very pleased to be in a position to moderate today's panel. See, our topic is one that is very near and dear to my heart. I spent 25 years on active duty in the Air Force. Then, starting in 2009, I had the great honor of serving for 5 years as General Counsel for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, where a major focus was on ending veterans' homelessness. In that role, I talked with lawyers all over the country, and I was frequently asked about what the legal community could do in order to better serve veterans. At first, I must admit, I didn't have a good answer. But then around 2010, I learned about something that you've already heard a bit about, and that's VA's Project Challenge. Project Challenge surveys homeless veterans and those at risk of being homeless, along with VA employees and community partners, to rate the needs of the veteran population. The survey results are then used to identify unmet needs and encourage the development of new partnerships to meet those needs. When I saw the results identifying the top 10 unmet needs of homeless veterans, I was shocked. That's because the survey showed that legal needs dominate that list of the top 10 unmet needs. Those services include legal help with things like debt collection, expunging criminal records, child support, other family law issues, help with outstanding warrants and fines, and legal help with restoring a driver's license, and as well as legal help with appealing a discharge, characterization of discharge. Because you see, when a person receives a discharge that is not honorable, that can affect them for the rest of their lives. You know, as I looked at those results, it was the one about the driver's license which really hit home for me. The need for help in restoring a driver's license. Because what happens in our society is oftentimes states use revoking a driver's license as a penalty for an individual failing to keep up with their child support obligations. Oftentimes, a child support obligation isn't kept up with because the veteran or the other individual loses a job. So they then lose their driver's license, which means that they're not able to have full flexibility in order to get to jobs. So one problem leads to another problem, which leads to another problem, all because they didn't have legal representation to help with issues that they face. The latest challenge survey results were released just last month, and they continue to show that legal issues dominate the list of unmet needs for homeless veterans and those at risk of being homeless. We're fortunate today to have 3 extremely knowledgeable panelists to help us explore how meeting legal needs can help address veteran homelessness. Our first panelist is Madeline Gingell. Madeline is a licensed clinical social worker and she serves as the Department of Veterans Affairs National Coordinator of the Legal Services for Veterans Program. Our second panelist is Sam Holmes. Sam is a Marine Corps veteran who serves as Executive Director of the Homeless Resource Council of the Sierras. Sam formerly served with the Bob Woodruff Foundation and was a member of LSC's Veterans Task Force. Third, and certainly not least, is Pi Young. Pi is the managing attorney for Veterans Medical Legal Partnerships for Bay Area Legal Services, an LSC grantee in Florida. First, I'd like to welcome each of our panelists today. And I'd like to start off with a question that I'd like each of you to respond to. And just so that you can prepare yourselves, I'd like to start with you, Pi, and then go to Madeline and then Sam. But, you know, the work that you do serving veterans experiencing homelessness is difficult work. What is it that led you to this work, Pi?
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for this wonderful introduction. I will share, as so many others have shared, that my father was a 24-year Navy veteran. And so while we didn't have to travel by the time I came along, I spent a number of days with him at medical facilities, receiving treatment on both sides of the bay. And so I also have a background in social work and mental health. And so a lot of the people that I worked with were veterans. And so this is really a full circle opportunity for me to work in this position. That's exactly how I felt when I was able to join Bay Area and do this work. It was just definitely full circle. But my push was definitely my experience with my father at the VA.
Thanks. Madeline, how about you?
Thank you. Similar to as we've heard from others today, really the influence very on in my younger years of veterans in my life, family members, community members, that not only did they serve in active duty, they continued to serve the community very humbly in modest manners throughout their lives. So just modeling that to me and work ethic really drew me to a career at the VA. And I truly feel that it is a privilege to have an opportunity to give back, but to also be a steward of federal resources. Growing up in a blue-collar rural part of Pennsylvania, I was acutely aware of sacrifices that families made. So this is truly a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Sam, how about you?
Thanks, Will, and a good morning from the West Coast and good afternoon to everyone else around the country. I joined the Marine Corps 10 days after my high school graduation and probably would have never graduated high school if my Marine Corps recruiter didn't tell me that they were out of GED waivers. And transitioning out of the Marine Corps after 5 years of honorable service and multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, I found myself housing insecure and living out of cars and couch surfing, and really finding it really difficult to transition back into a community because, as many of you know, veterans don't transition out of the military to an abyss. They transition into communities, and to find my community was a very difficult thing. And I was lucky enough to find a veterans community, both in using my GI Bill and later on to support the veterans community in work that I did professionally and also in volunteer settings. And something I learned, not just about veterans, but I've always believed about all people, is that the tremendous capacity for people if given the opportunity to thrive. And nowhere is that more apparent than with veterans who have raised their right hand to support and defend the Constitution and do something greater than themselves. The potential for all veterans to be not just supportive of themselves and their families, but of their communities and certainly other associations they have, keeps me continually engaged in the work that I do.
Well, thank you, Sam. I've gotten word that our guest has arrived, so we're going to pause the panel for a moment. And it's now my honor to introduce our guest, Nichelle Carver. Nichelle is a senior regional director with the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, the only federal agency charged with responsibility to examine the root causes of homelessness and develop strategies to end homelessness in America. Nichelle has 25 years of experience leading teams in the mental health and homeless services fields. Her career began with a shelter program, assisting families experiencing homelessness with locating permanent housing and supportive services. She then spent more than 15 years with the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development. During her tenure, Virginia decreased overall homelessness by 34% and was the first state to functionally end veterans' homelessness. Thank you so much for making time to join us today, Nichelle. Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. And so I'm pretty sure you're going to hear airport sounds because I'm actually leaving Dallas today. But I'm so grateful that we could figure out at least how to kind of make this work so I could speak to you guys for a few minutes. I appreciate the really warm welcome. I have been in this field for 26 years, and I'm really proud of the things that Virginia did, especially with working with our legal aid societies and nonprofits. So I just want to jump in real quick because I only have a few minutes before we're supposed to board. So again, I appreciate you guys squeezing me in. So I just wanted to say, if you are not working with your state's homeless services, it would be beneficial, and I'll tell you some of the reasons why. So in Virginia in 2009, when the Homeless Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Program was rolled out, that was really our first time in subgranting funding to our different legal aids throughout Virginia. Mind you, it wasn't allowed. So it wasn't that we weren't doing it. It's just not something that was on our radar. But under President Obama's HPRP program, one of the groups that we were encouraged to work with were our legal aids. And I remember clearly working with the legal aid of Blue Ridge, Virginia. And so when we worked with our legal aid societies and groups, one of the things we saw that we were getting into areas that we weren't actually part of. Again, I apologize if you're hearing, I chose to sit at the one place that was about to board. So I'm not sure why. But anyway, the legal aids were instrumental in helping us with that HBRP program. But then you fast forward a couple of years later, and as you heard, Virginia was the first state to functionally end homelessness for veterans. And one of the ways that that worked really well was because we had a partnership between legal aid, our Department of Veteran Services, and our corrections departments, and along with the Department of Housing. So when you put those groups together and they're all working for a singular goal of trying to figure out ways to support our veterans, what we found was that we were actually able to, once you break down those silos, to move in the direction. And what you see is exactly what happened. In November of 2015, we were able to functionally end homelessness. And what that means is that within 30 days, if a veteran is identified as experiencing homelessness, we have a space to get them back into housing within 30 days. So it doesn't mean you'll never see a veteran experiencing homelessness. It just means we have the systems in place in Virginia. The last thing I wanted to just say was legal aid was also instrumental in making sure that Virginia was able to add protections for people with different types of income to pay for their housing. So that is something that, of course, a state agency, and mind you, I'm with the federal government now, but I wanted to just make sure I spoke about how great the legal aids were in Virginia and how it helped us with the work we were doing. But there were two groups that were not protected classes. Our veterans were not protected class in Virginia. and based on source of income was not protected. And legal aid, all of the heavy lifting in terms of advocacy, the advocacy that we couldn't do as a state agency. And so we got that information, like we got it passed. Virginia is one of the highest eviction. We have 5 of the top 10 eviction cities in the country. And our legal aid groups were the ones who helped to push forth our VERP program, which was Virginia Eviction Relief Program. And that is a project where legal aids are based within different courthouses in those cities. And in those courthouses, basically folks they are directed to be able to talk to legal aid before the eviction goes through. So I wanted to just point all that out. Again, I know this is really quick and in the middle of your panel, so I appreciate you guys letting me come in and talk to you. And I hope that they share my information because I am a senior regional advisor that serves New York, New Jersey, and all of New England. But there are people in my same position throughout the country, and we can be able to connect you with homeless service providers if you are not already connected. So thank you so much for your time. They are now calling me to board, so I'm gonna get ready to go. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Nichelle. We really appreciate you carving out the time to spend a few minutes with us. Now back to our panel. Madeline, I have a question for you. I know that Secretary Dennis McDonough has prioritized ending veteran homelessness. What do the VA's efforts on this front look like at a high level? And more specifically, can you tell us about how your program, Legal Services for Veterans and Veterans at Risk of Homelessness, how those fit into VA's overall efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Secretary McDonough is an outstanding advocate and mentor to all of us in the VA, specifically the VA Homeless Programs Office. We will often hear or read, no veteran should be without a place to call home. The VA is committed to ending homelessness amongst veterans, clearly. The VA Homeless Programs Office focus is really threefold. It's to proactively seek out veterans in need of assistance, and that's usually done by coordinated outreach. Another is collaboration with non-VA agencies, such as employers, housing providers, different non-for-profit agencies, and others really to expand employment and affordable housing options for those veterans exiting homelessness. And then, of course, connecting the homeless or at risk for homeless veterans with resources such as housing solutions, healthcare services, community employment services, and other supports, including access to legal services. So as we know, and as it's already been mentioned today, we've learned a lot through the challenge survey. And access to legal services have consistently been identified as an unmet need. In fact, for the past 2 years, the need for different types of legal services, directly and indirectly, have been the top 10 unmet needs of homeless veterans. So it's a natural fit that the VA Legal Services for Veterans program is a part of the VA Homeless Programs Office. And within the Legal Services program, we really focus on outreach and training, promoting and supporting the medical legal partnership model across the VHA, and implementing our newest grant authority, which is the Legal Services for Homeless Veterans and Veterans at Risk for Homelessness grant program. I think you're muted, Will.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate that.
No problem. No problem.
I want to follow up with you with respect to those programs, those grant programs that you just mentioned. And when you began giving grants, I believe this past year, was that the first year that you were able to provide those grants?
Yes. This grant cycle started August 1st, very first grant cycle for this grant.
Excellent. So as you were looking to fund various projects that help this population of homeless veterans and those at risk of homelessness, were you looking to fund programs that helped, I suppose, rural veterans, partnership? Were you looking for partnerships between the VA and legal services providers, or something else? What, in other words, what was it that you were attempting to do?
Yeah, we were really listening to the voice of the veteran, and that came through so clear in the challenge survey, and just different feedback that we received from community legal service partners that we already work with, our pro bono medical legal partnerships. So we knew that the key intent of we refer to it as the LSVH grant. So we knew that the key intent of this grant was specifically for the provision of legal services to eligible veterans that were experiencing homelessness or at the risk of becoming homeless. And Sam was kind enough to share a little bit about how real and how important it is to also address and be mindful of the need to prevent homelessness amongst our veteran population. So the goal of the grant is really to provide specific legal services to remove those barriers to obtain or retain permanent housing. And with this grant, we're so proud because there's no income threshold. So there's no income level or limit that a veteran must be under to be eligible for the grant. There's also a focus on serving our women veterans. At least 10% of the total funding per grantee must go towards legal services for eligible women veterans. And just some of the types of legal services covered, obviously housing law, family law matters, income support, and that can be state and VA benefits. There is some limited criminal defense that is allowable under the grant. So that's our issues with driver's license or expungement of criminal records, military discharge upgrades, matters related to intimate partner violence, access to healthcare, consumer and employment law matters. So as I mentioned, our first grant cycle started August 1st. It's a 1-year grant. We're very just so proud of the work. And the VA awarded 79 grants, and those grantees are located in 38 different states and the District of Columbia.
Thank you very, very much. I understand that the organization that you work for, Bay Area Legal Services, of course, is both an LSC grantee as well as a recipient of one of those LSVH grants that Madeline just described. Just a global question about Bay Area Legal Services veterans work. What strategies do you use to reach veterans and to serve those that are living in your service areas that have legal needs?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madeline, as well. So we use several strategies to contact our veterans. So we have a 5-county service area that we are directly in contact with through our Major General Ernest in Maryland Bedkey, which is a very long name for our Veterans Legal Help Center. We have a statewide helpline that provides phone legal assistance at no cost to eligible veterans. We also are physically located at the VA. And so we've been there for about 6 years, and we have a regular office located there based upon a partnership with our local VAs in the community in our 5-county service area. We also do a lot of community outreach. We have a legal clinic at a homeless veteran drop-in site where veterans receive other services. And so we're also there if they want to speak with an attorney. We also we incorporate the legal community as well for pro bono affairs when necessary. There may be areas of law that are outside of what we can advise or assist with, but our pro bono, our local bar associations are willing and able to assist a veteran at no cost. And so we use a variety of methods to let the community know that we are here. We also rely greatly on collaborative efforts with community partners on a regular and ongoing basis. So we have meetings, we have presentations, we have workshops, we have trainings. And the most important thing is that our social work, our relationship with our social work departments at our VAs is our strongest source of referrals. They know us, they can send veterans to us, and we have a very good working relationship with them. And in these various ways, we identify veterans who, may just have a question or may need extended services.
Thanks, Pi. You're the managing attorney for Bay Area Legal Services Medical Legal Partnerships. Could you start off by describing exactly what a medical legal partnership is? And then how do your VA medical center-based medical legal partnerships assist veterans who are experiencing or homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness?
So a medical legal partnership is unique. It's not exclusively a legal clinic. The linchpin of the medical legal partnership is the collaborative efforts between either the social work and or the medical team at a facility, in this case, the VA, and legal services. So it's not that we just take referrals blindly or coldly by phone. We are physically located in the medical facility. We work closely with the social work team and or medical staff, and we are looking to identify root causes of why there may be recidivism with a veteran who's coming back in for maybe chronic health issues, or who's coming back in for other things that just keep happening over and over again. What is going on? And at one time, there was this big push to provide wraparound services for the veteran. We are a part of that partnership. So it's the total well-being of the veteran. It's the housing, it's the social work and the mental health and the emotional health. It's the healthcare, and it's also the legal services. Housing is the center of all of that. And I think it's important to note that when we're looking for homeless veterans, we need to expand what we think a homeless person or a homeless veteran looks like. We've seen recently with our national housing crisis that homelessness can appear in many different forms. And that's why I'm thankful for the terms of the grant, because it says, or at risk. Sam mentioned earlier about couch surfing. We often see veterans that come in and housing is just unstable. They're not living on the side of the road or under a bridge, but their housing is not consistent. It's not stable. That's a root cause issue. What is going on? What's the backstory? And so working with the social work team and or the medical staff, we're able to look at all of the needs of the veteran and see where we can be of most assistance with legal services.
Thank you very, very much. Sam, when I heard that you were going to be on this panel, some words that former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, something that he said came to mind. He was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs when I was at VA. And I went to a program several years ago, and I heard the words to this effect: we're living in the midst of a sea of goodwill when it comes to veteran services, but you can drown in a sea of goodwill. Can you comment on that from the standpoint of your background and the work that you've done in this area? What does that mean?
And thanks, Will. And I love that quote as well. And I'm reminded of a lot of really smart people picking up on that quote and really looking at what Admiral Mullen meant. And a paper comes to mind specifically from the Center for New American Securities, playing on the name. It's called Navigating the Sea of Goodwill, where they found that there were 40,000 nonprofits that were established to serve veterans exclusively. Now, when we think about that, and we think about that in the context of why are veterans often thought of as a vulnerable population? Well, it almost is counterintuitive, right? If we're in a resource-rich community or in a resource-rich population, why is it that for a long time, not currently, but for a long time, we saw overrepresentation of veterans experiencing homelessness. And we see overrepresentation of veterans incarcerated. Well, to me, I think what's at the center of that is the community. And though there are many resources that are available for veterans, community and where community, how a veteran associates to that community really is such a strong determinant for their ability to have a successful transition out of services. You know, as a young person myself, I told you a little bit about my background. I never really fully understood what it was that was available to me, nor did I really understand what I should be looking at to be able to self-diagnose problems, to ask for help. And it wasn't until I started building those communities, whether it was a community of nonprofits, whether it was a community that wasn't even veteran focused, but included veterans, things like a school, or later on in my career, that I started to really understand what those protective factors of a community can bring for me. And, you know, when I think about this audience that we're speaking to now and how you can help really bring your services to a community of veterans, I think that it, you know, really thinking about the humanity behind the veteran, right? Veterans just one of the many labels that we often assign to ourselves, right? You know, for a long time I was a Marine. Then I was a Marine Corps veteran, then I was a student veteran, then I was, you know, a member of, you know, my my school community, now I'm a father, and all of these things are growing off of my veteranness. I challenge people who are really seeking to serve veterans to really think beyond that, to you know, certainly frame services and understand services for veterans, but to think about it within the context of all your work. You know, that you want to be able to be to provide that safe space and safe community through an understanding of the unique cultural differences that we bring, as well as the unique experiences that we had. So the navigating of the sea of goodwill ultimately just becomes, you know, finding that those spaces and those places where we can be able to thrive, whether it is a community that is specifically set up for veterans, or if it's whatever community we choose to be a part of, or that we're sometimes forced into. Navigating that sea of goodwill oftentimes just takes fully enveloping ourselves in something beyond just our veteranness.
Thanks, Sam. And I really appreciate you mentioning navigating the sea of goodwill. And my teammate Kate has placed a link to that report in the chat. So really appreciate that. There's another term that I hear quite a bit, and it's a term of wraparound services. What's meant by that term?
Yeah, and I think Pi really started to talk about that in a really interesting context. You know, when we think about wraparound services, and I think about when we think about it in the context of VA and the way the VA looks at homelessness as a healthcare issue, I think that we can think of as wraparound services as all services that are proactively problem solving issues that address social determinants of health. In my current role, I work at the Homeless Resource Council of the Sierras, where I'm administratively leading 2 continuums of care here in Northern California. And when I first started in this role, I was really struck by the difference in approach that mainstream or general homeless services have in serving their clients, and how important and strong of an approach that VA takes, not only in, you know, a medical and Veterans Health Administration, or in across VA homeless services, even on the benefit side, but in the way that it implements, the way VA implements their grant programs, both Madeline's grant programs as well as other grant programs, such as supportive services for veteran families, where really taking a look at the whole health of an individual, right? The whole person care, whether it's financial health, whether it is, you know, civil legal needs, all the way to to vocational rehab to help a veteran thrive and to grow their competencies and skills in the employment marketplace. Wraparound services ultimately really is whole person services, and the recognition that, not one need that an individual presents with is the sole determining factor of their current situation. And that really the humanity of everything that we do needs to be at the center of the care that we give.
Thank you very much. When I hear that term, especially in the context of the VA, one of the things that I learned is that the VA is huge. Department of Veterans Affairs, second largest cabinet agency, and the nation's largest integrated healthcare system. And because it's so large with all these different employees, all these different facilities, it's really important that there be a no wrong door approach. That regardless of how you access the organization, you're going to get to where you need to get to. And that can be challenging. Pi, start this one with you. What do you see as the greatest challenges to serving veterans who are experiencing homelessness? And what do you see as the most successful strategies?
Good question. So one of the challenges that we've experienced is locating veterans that are in housing crisis. If they are connected to the VA and they are receiving other healthcare services at the VA, it is highly likely that we will receive a referral from a social worker or other VA employee for that veteran. But if they are disconnected from the VA or have been disconnected for a while, it is hard to identify where they are and what their needs are unless they come to us. One of the other challenges that we face is connecting with our female veteran population. And so we know that they are out there. We know that they exist. We work with our Women's Veterans Department at our local VA to provide education, awareness, make contact, build relationships. But sometimes it's just a little bit more challenging to get them and to talk to us. And so those are some of the challenges we've seen, but we're definitely working on it by building relationships, and consistency is key. Veterans know that we're there and they know where we're located, how to contact us. It may take a couple of visits to our office or a couple of calls before they actually sit down with us and really start to share what their needs are. The second part of the question is, what are some of the greatest opportunities? Is that?
Yes.
So one of the greatest, I'm sorry.
What works? What are the greatest?
What works? So one of the greatest things is being recognized for the work that we have already been doing through LSC funds and other funders with the MLP, Bob Woodruff Foundation as well. But to be recognized for the work that we're doing, and then the VA to look at the challenge survey, look at the work of legal services and say, here is a need that is recurring, here's a need that is tangible, that is live, and here is funding to help meet that need. With this supplemental LSVH funding, we were able to hire another attorney specifically dedicated and a paralegal for this work with homeless veterans. And for me, that is very exciting because sometimes it really does take a little bit more time and effort and patience to work with a unique population. And so I'm very proud that we were able to apply for this funding and receive this funding, because it created more of an opportunity for us to establish a connection within our veteran community.
Thank you. Sam, how about you? What do you see as the greatest challenges to serving veterans who are experiencing homelessness? And what do you see as successful strategies?
So I think that there are really two challenges, and I'll summarize them in systemic barriers as well as identity barriers. For systemic barriers, there are so many wonderful programs to financially compensate veterans for things like disability, as well as things, are like VA supplemental Social Security, but sometimes these become barriers to be able to fully serve veterans due to income restrictions. The disability and compensation program often can be a wonderful fixed income for people who are unable to fully engage in the job market. But it is a very wonderfully generous program as well. And as we know from all the people that we serve, that just because you're in a generous fixed income program doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be financially stable moving forward. So I see that as an interesting barrier. The other one is identity, and this goes back to, I think, the communities I was talking about. We talk a little bit about things like discharge upgrades. I talked about one of her challenges being female veterans, and when I think about discharge upgrades in particular, and how it even correlates with systemic barriers, when you receive an other than honorable discharge, oftentimes you are being told that explicitly being told your service may not be fully honorable, and you may not fully identify yourself as a veteran. Furthermore, you are now not able to access critical resources from VA, or even in many cases, community-based organizations that are addressing a lot of the psychosocial as well as medical issues that may have contributed to instances to be for an administrative punishment for you that ultimately got you administratively separated from the military, which is often the case with a bad paper discharge. So what do you have available to you? In many cases, you may have traumas that were related to the incident, and to I think DoD's credit here, DoD's recognized that, and it's done a really good job fast tracking the processes for discharge upgrade. But that took many, many years, and there are tens of thousands of veterans out there potentially who have been discharged in an unjust way due to conditions of their service, leading to a behavioral or a punitive punishment that ultimately led to a bad paper discharge. For female veterans, I can't tell you how many stories I heard of women I've served with walking into a VA medical center, and the first thing that they're said is, are you here for your husband or your father? And just a recognition that that women serve in the armed forces, and that they are the fastest growing subpopulation serving in the armed forces, is something that is worth recognizing by all members of the American community, and especially when you're looking at serving veterans, to keep that on top of mind so that you don't unknowingly or certainly unintentionally classify somebody on their veteran status. And then just in terms of identity as well, I think it's also worth noting that I mentioned things like the prevalence of veterans who are overrepresented, who are represented in the homeless population, or those who are in the criminal justice system. Sure, we've seen those numbers stabilize that more closely to the general population, but we still see a lot of inequities, especially racial inequities in a lot of those statistics. Much like in the general population experiencing homelessness, Black African American veterans are just as overrepresented there, and in those who are incarcerated, severely overrepresented to the general population. So certainly ensuring that we are looking, that as we are serving those veteran clients, is to recognize the biases that exist in the DoD system, the biases that exist in the VA, and the biases that exist in our communities, I think is something always worthy of calling out and playing top of mind to, because oftentimes they are some of the biggest challenges to be able to serve the population.
Sam, thank you very, very much for your last statement there. Where you and Pi have contributed there, say, with respect to the women's veterans and the issue of classification and definition. Those are very real challenges. With women, VA has a Center for Women's Veterans. I used to work with people in that office. One of the things that I was surprised to learn is that a lot of women who have served as in the military, asking them the question, are you a veteran, was not an effective way to find out whether or not they had served in the military. And because of confusion over what the term veteran actually means. Some people think that it means that someone who served in combat. Others have different definitions. And even at the VA, you have a situation in which in VA's statutes, Title 38 of the United States Code states that an individual is not a veteran for certain periods of time, regardless of how long they served, if their discharge is characterized in a negative manner. Now, there are exceptions, but because of those differences, there is so important that we do an effective job of research, of outreach, as well as an effective job of not only depending upon the Department of Veterans Affairs, but depending upon other organizations as well. So, Pi, I'm wondering, what do you see as the greatest opportunity for expanding veteran services?
So Sam has mentioned so many things, and I just keep nodding my head because everything he said is so what we keep hearing from our community listening sessions. Expanding veteran services is not, I want to put this in a positive way. It's not expanding more organizations. And then we talked about this concept of a lot of, this sea of goodwill. Expanding veteran services is explaining who you are, what you offer, and connecting the dots for veterans and service members all the time. A lot of times when you mention a veteran may come into the VA and they may feel overwhelmed. There's an overwhelming rush of emotions. They may have been separated from service for a while. They may not come to the VA because of previous adverse experiences. And so a lot of it, expanding veteran services, at least on the grassroots level, for someone like me or like my team, is making sure the veteran feels that they are getting reconnected. And that if it means walking them down the hall to records, if it means walking them down the hall to patient advocacy, and not doing the cold pass off, but the warm handoff. Expanding veteran services means continuous education. It doesn't mean more organizations. It doesn't mean more acronyms. It doesn't mean, because that creates confusion. We found that in our community listening sessions with veterans, they are very much overwhelmed. And they are really dealing with, depending on when they separated, as Sam mentioned, how they even feel about their veteran service, about their connection to the VA. So it really does mean regaining trust. And that's really a lot of it, is regaining trust for those veterans who have felt separated or disconnected, and also being consistent and also being present and connected to say, Madeline, is there something we can do to help? This person, Sam, is there something that we can do to help? And really creating and sometimes hand-holding the veteran so that they feel secure enough to receive the services that they have earned.
Thank you very much. A question came in about outreach to female veterans, and what's the best language to use? And is it simply to ask whether or not they have served in the military? So I see affirmative nods there.
I was going to say veterans cultural competency. I remember taking that course and always looking for the best way to communicate with veterans, because not just for myself, but as I'm onboarding new people on the team, And so there's a lot of respect that goes into it and not making assumptions. A simple conversation, a communication, and letting the veteran tell you how they would like to be addressed, or what makes them uncomfortable or most comfortable. It really is a matter of communication, and not entering the conversation thinking that you know what that veteran needs, wants, or wants to be addressed as.
Thank you very, very much. Madeline, you, as a licensed clinical social worker, I understand that before your current role, you served in the context of a medical legal partnership. And so you're very familiar with that model. And so I'm wondering, what do you see as the utility of that model in serving veterans and who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness?
I think the key is just veteran-centric care. Start where the veteran is. The veteran is the one who determines the types or level of service that they need or want at the time. That's how you build the trust. That's how you build the consistency. So the medical legal partnership model is truly a collaborative approach. The co-location at the VA site really enables that interdisciplinary team approach. Again, always being mindful that it's veteran-centric. And I think that's really contributed to the success across the VHA. At this time, we have 38 medical legal partnerships, on-site, in-person medical legal partnerships, and over 120 like less formal, less frequently offered VA-affiliated legal clinics.
Thank you. And before I get a hook telling me that I've overrun my time, I'm going to ask each of you one final question. And that is, there's one takeaway that you want members of our audience to take from this session. What would it be? Of
course, I get to go first on this question. I would highly encourage every community partner, every collaborative partner, if you have a medical legal partnership at your VA, I tell the social work team where I am here in Florida, when in doubt, refer. If you're not sure that there's a legal issue or something that an attorney could assist with, but you have an inclination, when in doubt, always refer, always ask the questions, refer the veteran, encourage them to seek the services without being too overbearing. But it's better to make the connection or make the suggestion than to let it pass and there's really a need that has gone overlooked. So when in doubt, always refer.
Refer to who?
Well, in my case, you would refer to our Veterans Legal Helpline. And so I'd be glad to share the number, or it's 1-866-486-6161. And that is a statewide for Florida Veterans Legal Helpline. Any veteran in any of the 67 counties can call in and speak with an attorney regarding their legal need or question. And sometimes it really is just a question. And as I mentioned earlier, there may be other legal needs that spawn from that. So we just encourage to call. And again, the number, I can put it in the chat. It's 1-866-486-6161. And that is our Veterans Legal Center. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kate.
When in doubt, refer.
When in doubt, refer, always.
Sam? What's your one takeaway?
So I would say my one takeaway, especially for legal services providers, is connect with organizations across your community, especially veteran serving organizations. Nobody knows what a legal issue is unless you're an attorney or work with attorneys. And I would say connect and get to know not just those who raise their right hand to support and defend the Constitution, but get to know the systems that work for veterans and really use that to increase your knowledge on addressing systemic barriers, but also on other tactics for serving others in your community through your legal aid work. I know that I'm pushing that all the time in my community, that how much we can learn from VA, how much we can learn from the implementation of different, rapid rehousing programs from VA and different, outreach, the way the VA does outreach, because, we have seen in communities across the U.S., we've had veteran homelessness in the last 10 plus years now. And there's such a great opportunity to learn from those who are integral in that work, and apply it to all populations.
Thank you, Sam. And Madeline, you have the last word.
Oh boy. I think we have a theme here. I think the theme is reach out, refer, let us know if you're aware of a veteran that is homeless, at risk, or in need. Contact the National Call Center for Homeless Veterans, 877-424-3838. It's available 24/7, and that's a national number. Reach out, call us.
And can we have that once more, please?
Yes, it is 877-424-3838.
And I see it's in our chat as well. So thanks, Kate, for doing that for us. Greatly appreciate it. I want to thank each of you for offering all your great insights today. This is important work, and we can't do it alone. So thank you very, very much. Danielle?
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much to you, Will, Sam, Pi, and Madeline for that exceptional conversation. I just feel heartened as a veteran to be a part of this organization and connected with all of you. Love the ending tagline of refer, connect, reach out. We want to thank our LSC board members for their participation, John Levy, John Malcolm, and Abby Kuzma. And a tremendous thank you to everyone in the audience who joined us today. We hope you found the discussions informative and they gave you ideas to take home for your own organizations and communities. A recording of today's program will be available on LSC's YouTube channel in the coming days, in case you'd like to share it with someone who couldn't watch in real time. We also hope you'll continue to follow LSC's programming and social media as we embark on our 50th year of existence in 2024. And for our final word this afternoon, I turn the virtual microphone over to our president, Ron Flagg.
Thanks, Danielle, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. On Veterans Day, we honor the 42 million brave women and men who have served our country in uniform and the families who have selflessly shared their sacrifice. However, the many richly deserved tributes we pay our veterans ring hollow if we do not also provide them with the necessary support and access to housing, jobs, legal assistance, medical services, and other resources they need as they return home and transition to civilian life. For almost 50 years, LSC and its grantees across the country have supported veterans by providing assistance on a wide variety of legal challenges, including eviction, foreclosure, unemployment, and wrongful denial of benefits. On behalf of my LSC colleagues, thank you to our vets for your service. My special gratitude to our two tremendous LSC colleagues, Danielle Brooks and Will Gunn, for your military service and leadership at LSC. Finally, thanks to our speakers and the panel today for shining a bright light on the housing insecurity faced by too many of our veterans. As we at LSC enter our 50th year, we pledge to redouble our efforts to illuminate these issues and identify the most effective service models used by legal aid to address them. Again, reach out for help where you need it and stay well. Thank you.